Hello, Internet. If you're watching this video, you want to know about cognitive load, or your curiosity just has really good taste, because cognitive load is an important issue, a cool issue, and one that I think will be applicable in your everyday life. Probably the first thing that a conversation designer at myself thinks of when they wake up in the morning, when they put pencil to paper and design interactions between virtual agents and human beings. Just really the guiding principle that makes us double check every single decision we make. So what is cognitive load? The working definition that we use every day that I think is very accessible is cognitive load is just the demands placed on a human being's memory when they're talking to a machine. So let me explain in a little detail with some examples of what that means. When you're in the medium of voice, like we are, Grace is a virtual voice agent. She is not a chatbot. There's no visual record that you're seeing of the conversation, like you might be when you're chatting with the chatbot, or even like texting with a friend on your phone. Can't look back and see whether you answered the question correctly, what the question even was, the bigger context for what's going on. So that places a demand on your cognitive load where you just have to have the entire facts and context of the conversation in your head, at least one question at a time, but generally speaking for the entire conversation. So what we don't want is high cognitive load. Just being there, having the conversation, puts demands on human memory. We don't want to overextend people. Everyone's memory, no matter what they say, is fallible at the best of times, and a lot of time, Grace is talking to busy human beings that have other things on their mind. And it makes a really halted conversation if we overload cognitive load and a human being has to be asking things like, wait, what? Can you repeat that? Can you go back a second? I want Grace to be able to accommodate all of those things, which is better if we never have the need for it. So I want to give an example that still haunts me to this day of high cognitive load that really shaped me into the conversation designer I am today by learning to avoid this situation. We were prototyping an early Grace virtual agent just to see if it could get through a particular medical use case in which a standardized medical form had to be filled out verbally over the phone. That kind of thing is a really good application of Grace, but this was a little beyond what's reasonable because the answers to the form for every question, and there were several, had to be answered with one of the same 5 options every time. People are very used to seeing forms like this on paper, where you're just going to check a box for every question. Pretty easy to do. But when you're asking someone a series of questions that has only 5 allowable options that have to be read verbatim, but that have to be provided word for word back to the virtual agent, that is way too much for people to handle. Because first, what do we have? We have asking the question about someone's recent health, which takes some time. People want to reflect on their recent health, give their doctor a real answer. That's an unavoidable amount of cognitive load right there, and fairly significant if you really want to think carefully, give the best information you can. To add on, having to remember the verbatim 5 answers that you're allowed to give to this question, next to impossible for the general population, and deeply unpleasant for the people, I think, who could even manage it to begin with. And there's no shortcutting possible there. As conversation designers, and bound by professional ethics and also working with the healthcare industry, we could not have the virtual agent fudge any of the answers. If someone gave an answer, the human being would say, okay, that probably pretty clearly maps to this acceptable answer. I'm just going to check the acceptable answer because that's pretty clearly what they meant. Can't make that inference when you're working in medicine and just when you have standards of integrity. You have to go with one of the 5 accepted answers with no variation. Otherwise, it's just not acceptable. People remembering 5 verbatim answers to a question that they already had to put some thought into thinking, just not something that we want to do in the medium of voice, and that's okay. Plenty of other information intake that virtual agents are really good at. We're just working around the very, very human, unavoidable limitations of memory. Better just to have a virtual agent text that form so someone can do it with a visual record with low cognitive load situation than to try to force people to juggle all these facts in their mind at once. How do we get around situations like that? We have our virtual agents kind of gather information very step by step. And that might sound like it extends a conversation unnecessarily. Why have a lot of questions when you could boil them down to like 2 questions that cover a lot of information? For one, it's pretty hard for any voice system in the world to pick out multiple pieces of information from a single human utterance and then juggle those pieces of information, check that they're both correct, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd want to avoid that. But also, it's just bad for the human being, putting the pressure on them to give really detailed responses that are accurate in every way and cover what they need to say. So it's better, instead of asking in one go, what is the airport you want to fly out of? What's the airport you want to fly into? What day do you want to leave? What day do you want to fly back? And is there a time of day you prefer for your flights? I'm not going to all ask that in one go. We'll ask each one of those things as its own question. And in practice, people talking to virtual voice agents really seem to prefer things that way. You can be much more clear, you can feel much understood when you're giving just one piece of information at a time, but you also feel, I think, that you're getting the right level of care. But ultimately, what does that come back to is cognitive load. Answering one question, mapping one question, one answer together is going to be much more manageable for any human being talking to a virtual agent to do. To sum up, cognitive load is demand that we place on human memory, mainly in the voice channel, when you're speaking to a virtual voice agent and you can't scroll back through some text record of your conversation, meaning that you have to put every relevant piece of information in your short-term memory. It's either impossible or unpleasant, so we keep cognitive load as low as we can at all times. That was me, Cooper Johnson, Voice User Experience Designer at Griddspace, speaking on cognitive load. And if you are interested in cognitive load or any adjacent topics, feel I didn't speak long enough on any one of those, feel free to leave us a comment. We're always happy to chat.